Democrats Gary Chambers and Luke Mixon look to take on Senator John Kennedy for their chance to flip a Senate seat blue. While the polls still show Kennedy pulling ahead by a few percentage points in the primary, Gary Chambers says if he is elected, he wants to put an emphasis on things that Kennedy has voted against.
Senator Kennedy voted against infrastructure. Roads aren't Democrat or Republican. They aren't black. They aren't white. They're for everybody. Everybody uses the roads. That's $6 billion of resources that is coming to our state. No thanks to him.
Chambers previously ran for Congress in Louisiana's 2nd District, and he missed the runoff by just 1,500 votes. He's gained notoriety in this race for his provocative campaign ads that have gone viral. As the most far-left leaning candidate, he describes himself as a Democrat that could rally the non-voting population to the polls.
The problem wasn't that black voters aren't in the state or that 30% of white voters aren't voting for Democrats. It's that we didn't give them a candidate that was actually a Democrat, that we didn't give them a candidate that they could believe in, that they could support, and therefore they didn't show up.
Chambers' key policies look to help bring Louisiana off the bottom of the list for education, poverty, and job opportunities.
We've also got to build an economy that works from the bottom up, not the top down. That's the approach that I'm going to take towards legislating, and I think that when we do that, we'll build an economy that works for working class people.
Chambers is a pro-abortion advocate, supports gun reform as a gun owner, and supports immigration and looks to reform the process. Running against Chambers is Luke Mixon, the former fighter pilot that takes aim on his first political office. Mixon is seen as the moderate Democrat choice as he looks to take on extremism in the country.
I believe Senator Kennedy is a far-right candidate, and then there's me, right? And I mentioned extremism in our country. That's largely, almost exclusively the decision that what got me into this race. I think there's too much extremism, and I believe that 80% of us in this state are right there in the middle.
Mixon has centered his campaign on Senator Kennedy voting against critical legislation that has brought funding to Louisiana.
We still see people with blue tarps on their roof. We see people who can't get back into their homes because their elected representatives are not fulfilling their promise. They're not fulfilling their obligation to care for those they represent.
Mixon has come out in support of codifying Roe should he be elected, and this comes after he announced he is anti-abortion with exceptions. After traveling around the state, he has also found how critical infrastructure needs are, especially in the areas of the state that are battered by hurricanes.
We still see people with blue tarps on their roof. We see people who can't get back into their homes because their elected representatives are not fulfilling their promise. They're not fulfilling their obligation to care for those they represent.
Mixon is also in support of raising the minimum wage, ramping up oil and gas production while supporting increased green energy, and providing more funding to law enforcement to tackle the rise in crime. Senator John Kennedy took office in the U.S. Senate in 2016 after multiple terms as Louisiana state treasurer. The senator declined an interview after multiple attempts to reach him. In order to force a runoff, no candidate can get over 50% of the votes, and if a candidate does, they win the race. For your local election headquarters, I'm Shannon Hecht.